It's gonna come up. You see that?
Yep.
You have to keep it in that range.
Looks good.
Went to Miami. Hey guys. November and everything.
Guys, we're at the Jefferson Market Library.
You don't have to whisper.
Yeah, we're going to be doing a talk about our new book. Karla's going to take you through. I'm not going to really respond to the chats for anybody just joining in.
That's the book. Storefront, NYC,
Yep.
photographs of the city's independent shops, past and present. We're going to be live streaming this, guys. So that's way anybody that's not able
Hey,
to
Damon
attend
Dunn.
the
Open
book,
Plumbing, Fenwes.
anyone that's not able to attend the book talk
Greg B.
can watch it on replay.
Yes.
And as a special treat, we're going to be taking questions from the audience at the
And
end of the live stream.
At the end of the live stream. AJ Vintage, Ronnie C. Keith Havens,
Perfect.
L the Original.
So,
So guys, we're going to be starting right around 6, maybe a little after.
Right. So, guys, right now we're in the historic Jefferson Market Library. We're going to be talking about our book, and I'm going to just show you the outside of the library. Like the thumbnail. Well, we're in a library, so I have to stay quiet. This is the children's part of the library. See, this is the children's area. You can see it's gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous library. I have to keep my voice down while I'm in the library. When we do the book talk, you'll be hearing me. Okay, guys, so now I'm not in the library itself, just in the vestibule, so I can talk a little bit. But this is the historic Jefferson Market Library. Now, this building that we're in is very special because it wasn't built as a library. It was actually built as a courthouse. And it was also a women's detention center. It's a historic building. It has this gorgeous staircase. I'm showing everybody the staircase. Yeah, gorgeous staircase. And there's actually a cupola to this building. Originally the courthouse for the city of New York. So now we're going to be starting our book talk soon. I want to show you this lovely miniature. This is what the building looks like from the outside. This is a miniature that was made of it. It's in the Gothic Revival style. Okay, so now I'm entering the part of the library where I have to keep my voice down. Okay. Now our book talk is happening on the first floor in the Willa Cather room. You see the Gothic Revival elements.
I got rid of everything there.
So I'm going to be, during the live stream, I'm going to be talking. James is going to be holding the gimbal, and he's going to be filming me. And he's not going to be able to talk to you in the chat because we're going to be, doing our book talk. So, but if you have any questions, please hold them to the end of the book discussion because we're going to be taking questions from the audience, including you guys. Oh, hey, Mike Landry. Hey, Don WV. Watch out for Mr. Bookman. Damon Dunn understands. Brendan Nelson says it's a beautiful building like a castle. Touring different places says hi. Christian Hansen saying hi. Big Horn MT is saying hello. AJ Vintage. Don Julio. Panagiotis S. Gorge. Lisa UK Girl. Kiana Maria. Keith Havens. Marty.
This looks so familiar to me.
Lisa UK Girl. Marty Lewis. Toilet Brush Salesman. Patrick Stahl.
Yes, it's still there, but it's not a big
Extra good.
It's a big
KLMN is saying hi. Yeah, Silence in Library. Hi, Marilyn M. Open Plumbing says, who's asking you questions? We're going to take questions from the audience after I do the slideshow. We're going to have a slideshow of images from our book. We're going to be discussing them. And then we're going to be taking questions from the audience at the end. And that audience includes you. This is the first time that we'll be streaming from a library events because we wanted our people, our fans, to be able to he listened to this book talk because they're not going to be recording it themselves. So we're live streaming it, and then other people that can't watch right now can watch it up on the replay, and they can hear us talking about our new book, Storefront NYC, Photographs of the City's Independent Shops, Past and Present. Yeah, there is a garden, absolutely. Let me show you. Let's see if we can see the garden. Yes, the garden is not open right now, but yes, the windows face the garden.
And when I moved here, people said to me, "Oh, you used to see what it used to be." And I would look at it and go, "Well, I think it's really good now."
So guys, it's almost 6 o'clock. So our event starts at 6, and we're going to be not able to talk to you while we're doing the book talk, but James is going to take over.
On this side.
So James,
Yeah.
you're gonna hold this, and let's see, it's just 6 o'clock, so, we'll start, and then if people come in,
Yeah.
late, that's fine, we're easy. Let me get all set. We've got new audio-visual equipment. If you guys aren't familiar and have never been to events in this room, this is new equipment because this library was under renovation for quite some time. It was closed, and they added a lot of new features, including this main rotunda area that opens up into the back of the garden, which is fabulous, and this new audio-visual equipment. So, I guess we'll get started, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. Now, okay, the microphone works. Perfect. Good. So, I'll get it set up. Now, can everyone hear me loud and clear? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for coming to our event. I'm Karla Murray. In the audience is my husband, James, who is also going to be recording this event so that people that couldn't attend tonight can watch it. So it'll be, talking from the sidelines, but mainly I'll be doing most of the talking, which is honestly works out really well because that's how our marriage works out really well. And I do all the talking and he stays mostly quiet.
It works.
Exactly. That's a healthy marriage, right?
Yeah. Oh, you hit the arrow. Go back one.
I hit the arrow. How did I do that? Okay.
Yeah.
So now you got a sneak peek at the first slide. All right. Great. So here we're going to be officially begin. Thank you so much for joining our talk. It's an illustrated talk. We'll be showing slides from our new book, Storefront NYC, Photographs of the City's Independent Shops, Past and Present. And for those who are not familiar with our work, we'll briefly discuss how we first came to document these lovely mom and pop stores and what we hope to accomplish by sharing our photographs of these gems and the stories behind them. I think I can move it a little closer. How's that? A little better? Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. For 25 years, my husband James and I have scoured the city to find mom and pop businesses from humble neighborhood stores to tucked away on narrow little side streets to well-known institutions on historic avenues, including, you already saw a sneak peek at our next slide, the lovely Bigelow Pharmacy, and I would say that's definitely a historic institution. Nearly half of the mom and pop stores that we photographed for our book and included in them have sadly disappeared. And the once unique appearance and character of the New York streets has suffered in the process. And the neighborhood store to us has always been a foothold for new immigrants and a comfortable place where familiar languages are spoken, where ethnic foods are present, and culture as well. And the shops are really like lifelines for their communities, and the residents depend on them for a multitude of needs. And when these shops fail, the neighborhood is definitely adversely affected, because to us, they set the life, texture, and pulse of every neighborhood. And also to us, New York is a very unique city because not only is it divided into 5 boroughs, and we divided our book into 5 basic chapters for each borough of New York City is represented in here.
but it's really the neighborhoods within each borough that further define the city. And each neighborhood is distinctly unique. And the stores, to us, really define the neighborhood. Like you can, walk around and someone can blindfold you, you can put you on a train and you don't know where you're going and say there's no announcements like on the train, so you don't know even what stop, kind of push you off, and not literally push you off, but just push you out of the train into a neighborhood, you don't know where you are, then take off the blindfold, and you look around and you see the stores and you be like, I know exactly where I am. Here I am on Arthur Avenue in literally the Bronx, because you'll see a preponderance of mom and pop Italian businesses. So that's what I mean by like a city being, the neighborhoods being the definition of, the little stores defining each neighborhood. And our journey began to photograph these stores for an entirely different project. It began in the mid-1990s. We were combing the many distance neighborhoods of New York City, documenting its street culture. And we would often go back to like the same neighborhood again and again and again after a certain amount of time had passed, because we were, interested in seeing, what was different about it. And we began to notice that these little old stores, somehow like everything looked different. They either closed or the stores were still open in business, but they had refaced them. They had modernized their facade, and somehow it did look different. And to us, like the whole neighborhood kind of began looking different, feeling different. Like in lots of ways, it lost like its attraction. Like the very reason we were attracted to the neighborhood to begin with was starting to fade away when these little mom and pop stores closed. So we kind of made it our mission in our minds. We're like, wow, we should start taking these photographs, because maybe that will be the only memory we have of these places. And this was all with 35mm film, because this is so long ago. Like a digital camera, your cell phone camera did not exist. And let me make sure everyone in the back can hear me. Let me see if I can.
Well, just hold.
Yeah, maybe I'll just hold it. That's even better. I'll hold it. We'll do it old school. I'll be like a rock star here. So we began taking these photos with our 35mm camera, because again, it was before the digital age. And to us, it was all about like the visual aesthetics, like why we would take a photo. We really loved the storefront, whether like we chose for the cover of Vesuvio Bakery, the lovely breads that were, on display in the window, or the signage, like that gold leaf lettering you see in the window that says Vesuvio Bakery, Italian breads and biscuits. And we were fascinated by these window displays, the architectural adornments sometimes that surrounded the store, and even their big neon signs. A lot of the stores, at one point, now so many have disappeared, had these large neon signs, because neon was like, your advertisement. Hey, come into the store. You could see it from like down the block, or if it was on an avenue, all the way, down the avenue. And that was before, the internet or anything like that. You had to walk around to find a store. It wasn't finding you through an ad on social media, or, even really before television. It was your appearance of the store that made it important. So for us, that was kind of our criteria of how we began taking these photos. And although it began as a visual project, like, it was all about the look and feel of the store, what we also did early on was we went inside and we would introduce ourselves to the store owner or the manager, and we would tell them, we're like, wow, your store is beautiful, we just took a photo of the outside, or, if we hadn't taken a photo yet, we would introduce ourselves and tell them why we wanted to take a photo. And it was fascinating, because it opened up a whole new level to our project, because they had so much joy and pride in this store, and they shared this joy and pride with us. We would ask them all these pointed questions, like, how long have you been in business, or if it was a family business, like, how many generations is it now? Because, you know, we would notice, like, if the sign says since like 1894, and then we looked at the person and they looked younger, we'd be like, oh, well, who was it? Your great-grandfather started? And they would tell us all these interesting stories, which we're going to share some of them with you today. And one of the things that we found out, though, is that if the owner did not own the entire building that their storefront was located in, that was the main reason why these stores began to close. And it wasn't something that we guessed at. This is talking to the owners, and we would ask them, oh, do you own the building? How many years are left on your lease if they did not? And they would share us. I mean, more often than not, they would actually tell us what their rent was. I mean, they were so forthcoming with their information that we're like, wow, this is fabulous. And I was recorded it with like a little micro cassette recorder. Like it was like a mini little tape about, I would say, I guess, about this big, and maybe the size of like 2 quarters put together. And, you know, like I would tell them I was recording it, but I was just, you know, so I wouldn't make any mistake, but, you know, kind of keep it discreet. And I started amassing all these interviews because basically I was the one doing the interviews. James would often take a photo, I would take a photo as well, but being that I'm the talkative one, I was the one doing the interviews. And when we noticed that when these small businesses would close, primarily because of a rent increase, oftentimes it would either stay closed and empty, or an institution like a chain store or a bank or something like that would take its place. And that further, like, you know, really impacted the neighborhood, especially, you know, in our neighborhood, the East Village. I mean, at one point, there was literally a bank on every corner of like every major intersection. And we're like, oh my God, we don't really need any more banks. Like, what is this? So now we're going to begin to talk about our first storefront. Now, this isn't the first one we photographed, but it's a beauty, and why we wanted to include it, it's literally diagonally across the street from the library here. This is C.O. Bigelow Apothecaries, and it's an historic building. You can see even Bigelow Building written for it, because on the upstairs they had their like surgical supply center. It was established in 1838. And it's actually the oldest apothecary in the entire United States. So not just New York City, but the entire United States. It's in fact so old that they once sold leeches and opium as remedies. Of course, not anymore. Leeches have fallen out of favor, and opium, you know. We all know the story of that one. According to legend, the chemist at Bigelow even created a salve for Thomas Edison to treat his burnt fingers when he was first developing the light bulb. And we met the 3rd generation owner, Ian Ginsberg, who was so delightful, gave us a grand tour of not only the pharmacy itself, which is a thing of beauty when you step inside, because it has the penny tile floor, and it has a counter that now acts as a cosmetics counter, but it once was a soda fountain. Because mom and pop pharmacies back in the day, they not only were operating as a drugstore, but also as a gathering place where you would sit down and you can get an egg cream or a malted milk or something like that. I mean, they, of course, did away with that, but the original soda fountain, if you go in there today, you can see it because it displays cosmetics. So, like, they repurposed it. And Ian told us that he started working in the store, and he used to stand on a crate behind the pharmacy counter and would help the customers. And he also would fill the little jelly cups behind the soda fountain, because at the time they still had the operating soda fountain. He used to fill the little jelly cups, and he told us that many of the items that they make at the store are their signature, products that they formulated back in the 1800s. Their hand creams, their body creams, and their salves. And I can personally attest, I'm a big fan of their lemon body cream. I buy it by the tub. You can buy like a little hand-sized one, like a little squeeze tube, and you can buy like a little pint-sized vial, but then they have like these big tubs, and that's what I buy because it's cheaper that way if you're gonna use it a lot, and then you can just fill like individual little, I guess you could say that's my hack of the day. You can fill little individual travel-sized containers with their lemon body cream, and then it was formulated in 1870. And if you look at the ingredients, it's like all natural, and it has real lemon oil extract as one of the ingredients. It's saying that it's skin lightening too. And Ian told us that the reason why his store is still in business today, because obviously there's been preponderance of chain stores opening up, drugstores, there's many different chain drugstores here in New York City, is that it's a totally different experience going into their store than going into a chain drugstore. They give everyone individual service, and when you step in, they speak to the customers, they ask, can we help you, what are you looking for? It's not just like direct you to aisle 1 to get a cold remedy, or go to aisle 3 to get some first aid products like a Band-Aid or something like that. No, it's all about individual customer service, and people really appreciate that. And they even formulate custom prescriptions for children, like flavor them if it's a liquid medicine, and for doggies. And it's a dog-friendly store. We've actually, James and I have a rescue dog, and we brought him in there. In the summer months, they keep a little water bowl outside, but they give you the little biscuits for our doggo. And they have a great cat. So if you go inside, they have a cat, and its name is Allegra. And the reason why it's called Allegra is because Ian Ginsberg had an allergy to cats, so he named the cat Allegra. So he has to take Allegra to have Allegra around the store. So let's go to the next one. Out of Manhattan now, and we'll go into an outer borough. This is Morsher's Pork Store, and you can see Prime Meats, Morsher's Pork Store Incorporated, which they added that little awning later. And it's located, in case you're not familiar with it, on Catalpa Avenue by Woodward Avenue in Ridgewood, Queens. Now, Ridgewood actually used to be part of the borough of Brooklyn, but there was a big controversy a number of years ago, and they didn't want to be associated with a neighboring part of Brooklyn, and they voted, and they decided to break the way into Queens. So now Ridgewood is in Queens. And when we found Morsher's Pork Store, we were like, oh my God, this is like a thing of beauty. Because as a fan of neon signs, you can see Morsher's written in the beautiful script lettering with that light, like it's like a blue neon, and then it has the red in the pork store. And then we noticed, like, we're like, oh, what is that? That little guy off to the side, that lettering. It's just that deep. I'm probably saying it all wrong. So we quickly went inside and we said, we have to find out what in the world this all means. And we were lucky enough that Joseph Herbert Morsher, who was the second generation owner, was there when we took this photo and went inside. And he told us that it was a family butcher shop that was known for its homemade sausages and meats. And the specialties originate from Gachi, which is a German enclave in Slovenia. And that whimsical little drawing right there is actually, with the German writing, it's actually translates roughly to little table spread thyself. It's taken from the Brothers Grimm fairy tale story, The Wishing Table, the Gold Ass, and the Cudgel in the Sack, in reference to the magic table which sets itself. So it was, I guess, a fable that his family loved and often told, so that's how it became on the storefront. And we thought, oh, okay, that's really cool, because we were very, very, very curious about it. But the best thing about this place was the smell when you went inside. The aroma of the meat that they were curing there and their homemade sausages. So we asked her, we're like, oh, what is it, what is it about your sausages that are so special? Because they've been in business since 1957, so we figured they must be doing something right. And he told us that he uses his family's recipes that have been passed down from generations to generations. and mixed it with state-of-the-art, high-tech machinery for smoking and aging their meat. That they upgraded their kitchen throughout the years to keep up with their times, and that's why they were still in business today. And you can go visit the store. Unfortunately, they got rid of their neon sign. Sadly, we were big fans of it. They no longer have a neon, which, I mean, I think that could be a whole other discussion within itself, why so many neon signs disappear in New York City. Partially it's because they're very expensive to maintain, because they're exposed to the elements and all the rain, you know, like you guys know that it was raining like crazy the last couple of weeks, and a lot of these neon signs go out in the rain, like the transformers got wet. But the interesting thing about this store is that he told us that he has this modern machinery, and it's based on the way that his family used to move meat products up and down the mountains of the Alps according to the different humidity and temperatures, and that his modern machinery in his store today mimics that process of like moving the meat to different elevations to help in the curing process. And he said that years ago that he had to throw away entire batches of like 500 pounds of meat because it would get so hot during the summer that, you know, it would get ruined. And he had to employ, I'm gonna get the exact quote, five men working 5 days a week for long hours just to prepare all the meat in the kitchen. And now with his new modern machinery, he has only 2 men working 2 days a week and making twice as much product. So really, the thing that saved his business was that he modernized the equipment. And he took us on a tour of the back of his shop where the machinery is. And he told us that they use, it's not like a lot of these manufacturers that make pork sausages and other meat sausages use like smoking processes that like they're fake smoke. Like it's not real wood chips, but his is real wood chips, like hickory and applewood, and he had like all these different types of wood that he was using to impart that flavor. And I thought that was really, really, really fascinating. And it smelled amazing. And he showed us like the old meat hooks that he used to have like around the store where he used to like hang all the meat and move it around. They're still in the back today. But it was just so fabulous to hear the story. And it was like those kinds of stories, that's to us, they became almost as important as the photo themselves, because, you know, if we hadn't gone in and asked those questions, like, we would never have known. I mean, yes, we would have maybe tasted his product, which was fabulous, but we really wouldn't have known the story behind it. So it made it like even more special to taste it, because we know, like, you know, the blood, sweat, and tears in many ways that went into making it. So now we're going to go to another borough, out of Queens and into Brooklyn. This is Mansoura Pastries, and Mansoura's Oriental Pastry. And it's located on Kings Highway by East 3rd Street in Midwood, and it's been in business since 1961. But the baking legacy actually began in 1780 when the Mansoura family had a well-known bakery and confectionery shop in Aleppo, Syria, and then Cairo, Egypt, for close to 175 years. And King Farouk was a famous customer of theirs. And when we went inside, we met the second-generation owner, Josiane Mansoura, and she told us that her family had left Egypt because of war and instability, and they had settled in Brooklyn, and that they started the shop. And I have to confess that when we were outside the shop and we first saw it, we were like, oh wow, this is great, Mansoura Oriental Pastry. Let's go inside and maybe we can get one of our favorite custard egg tarts that we get like in Chinatown, or we can get maybe a moon cake, you know, because right now it's the Autumn Festival in Chinatown, and one of the specialties is you get these little moon cakes that they make specifically for the Autumn Festival, and we're like, oh, maybe they sell that there. We went inside, and we're like, wait a minute, there's no Oriental pastries inside here. Why does the sign say Oriental Pastry? So we were quizzically looking around, and Josiane said to us, oh, looking for. And I laughed because what she explained was Mansour's Oriental pastry, that her father called it Oriental pastry because Egypt was once considered part of the Orient, that it's the Near East, the Far East, and the Middle East were all the Orient. Like, you think of like the Orient Express, like the train. So when his family resettled in Brooklyn, he just took the French word for Middle East, which is Moyen Orient, and called the shops Mansour's Oriental Pastry because he wanted to denote the type of pastries that he sold there, because to him, they were from the Orient. But to us, I mean, me, growing up in New York, and I mean, I would look in the yellow pages and look under, you know, Oriental food or something like that if I wanted to order some Chinese food. So we were mistaken, and she laughed because I told her, yes, that's what we were expecting to find here. And she's like, oh, it's so funny that you said that because in the yellow pages, like around 15 years ago, they listed us under the title of Oriental food because of our name. And if you go there today, that's still in business, they changed their sign. There was so much confusion, I guess, because of the word, and now it's not, you know, commonplace to call anything the Orient. You know, people always think just, you know, China and other Asian countries. She got rid of that, and now it's just called Mansour pastries. But they still make the exact same thing, which their specialty is their pistachio baklava. And it is amazing. And she told us that one of the reasons why their pastries are so popular these days is because they don't use any dairy at all. It only has honey and sugar, which acts as a natural preservative. So there's no preservatives, you know, like no chemicals or anything like that, and no dairy. So because like veganism and other people that are vegetarian, they're not liking certain ingredients, it's actually kind of a resurgence in popularity, not just people who remember from the old, you know, back from home that have gotten this kind of baklava. They're, you know, it's like in vogue now, and she says she now ships all around the world. And then because it has those natural preservatives in it, it actually ships very well, she said, because she ships it all around the country. And it's a fabulous place. Josiane is still there today, and her children are working alongside with her. And they make everything by hand. And they also not only make pistachio baklava, they also make their own candies and chocolates. So definitely worth a visit out to Midwood, Brooklyn. All right, next we're stepping into the Bronx. And like I said in the beginning of the talk, if I blindfolded you and I put you on a train, and then I took off your blindfold and I put you on Arthur Avenue, you would know immediately you're in Little Italy, the Bronx. This is one of the stores that, to us, define the neighborhood. It's Dominic Doria and Sons. Oh, don't worry about that. I don't need it. Thank you, though. No. So Dominic Doria and Sons store was established in 1938, and it's an interesting photo because unlike most of the photos that are in our book, we included a person in it. Now, this was a conscious decision that we made early on in the project, was to actually not include people in our photos. And the reason why was because when you take a storefront photo, if you have a person in the photo, as a person, you always want to gravitate to looking at another person. That's just like the way human beings are. If there's a person and then something behind it, you will look at the person first and then maybe the thing behind it afterwards. And in our minds, we wanted to make the storefront, like the facade or the window display or the signage or whatever it is, we wanted to make that the hero of the photo and not the person. But we broke our own rule with this photo because when we first saw Dominic Doria and Sons Pork Store, which is on East 187th Street, by the way. It's not on Arthur Avenue, it's on a different side street, which is definitely also worth going to Don't, if you do go to Little Italy in the Bronx, don't just stay on Arthur Avenue. There's other streets to explore. So definitely go to 187th Street. Sadly, Dominic Donier's son's pork store is no longer there, which I'll talk to you about in a minute, but we met Mike. That's Mike standing outside. He's the second generation owner. And when we saw the pork store, Mike was standing kind of like he is in the photo. And we went across and I said, Mike, I didn't know his name. I said, are you DeOria? He said, yes. And I said, well, would you mind us taking a photo of your store? We really love it. And he's like, well, I'm not going anywhere. You know, just like that. Like, you know, matter of factly. Like, basically, like, well, I'm not moving. So, there you go. He left it in the frame. And I'm so glad we did because he really personifies the store. We went inside and it was like a chandelier of sausages hanging. I mean, you see the sausages hanging in the window from the meat hooks, but they were all hanging from the ceiling. I mean, every square inch of the store had sausages hanging. I mean, James is 6'4". I'm 5'9", so I didn't have to duck to go under the chandelier, but James actually had to duck. So he wouldn't hit his head on all these sausages. And the smell was amazing. And I said, Mike, what is it about your sausages? What is this smell? And he's like, oh, you know, we have only 2 sausages here. Sweet sausage or not sweet sausage. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, sometimes I flavor some with paprika, some with fennel seeds, some without fennel seeds. That's it. He's like, we don't have a lot of varieties, but what we do have, they're all made with TLC, tender loving care. That's my secret recipe. Because I said, oh, what's your secret? TLC, he said. And I was like, Mike, you know, I looked around. He was the only one in the store. And I said, do you have any, you know, helpers, or are you it? And he's like, you're looking at it, this is it. The store was my father's, and then my brother, Dominic, his father is also called Dominic, but my brother Dominic, because his brother was the older brother, Dominic Sr. and Dominic Jr. Was his brother, started working in the store when they were little kids. And he told us that when he first started working there, his father wouldn't even let him go near any of the pork sausages. He didn't go near a knife, he didn't go near the grinder, nothing. What he did was sweep the floor. He's like, I learned from the bottom up. And he's like, now, when my father finally trusted me to hold a knife in my hand, he taught me everything I know. And we would go together to pick out the pork that, you know, we would use for our sausages. We'd go to the big, at the time, he used to go down to well, now they moved everything to the meat market in the Bronx, but at the time he said he was also going all the way, it wasn't that far from here, in, you know, on the west side where they used to have a big market. And he learned everything like from the bottom up. And he said that was really important too, because it really taught him and his brother the value of working for a family-owned business and learning every aspect of it. And I said to him, Mike, okay, well, where's your brother now? He's like, well, my brother retired. And I was like, well, what about any kids? And he's like, well, my brother has family, sons and daughters, but they all became doctors and lawyers, and they have no interest in this pork store. And I'm like, well, what about you, Mike? And he's like, no, I'm not the marrying type. You know, I don't have any kids, I didn't get married, and you know what? When I die, the store is gonna die with me. And I'm like, it broke my heart to hear that, because the sausages were so good. On the train home, James and I were just eating the sausages. By the way, he also sold like some cheese, so I know we got some provolone cheese, like he would, you know, cut it up and then you could have like kind of a charcuterie, I guess you could say, of a snack on some cheese. And we happened to go by a nearby bakery, which I also recommend, the Deo Bakery. It's on Hughes Avenue. Also, they have an outpost on Arthur Avenue, but they do all the baking in their Hughes Avenue. It's in our book. Their Hughes Avenue storefront location. Pick up some bread from there, and you got your whole meal. You got the sausage, you got the cheese, you got the bread, you're done. So James and I were eating these sausages on the train ride home, And I said to James, you know what? I'm like, this is terrible that this lovely pork store, these sausages are so amazing, it will eventually close when either Mike can no longer work here or, you know, he decides to retire. Maybe we should learn the recipe. You know, he was a nice enough guy and he seemed to like us. Maybe he would teach us the recipe and maybe we should take the store owner. And honestly, even in bed at night, we were thinking about it. We're like, should we do this? I mean, it wasn't meant to be, but we seriously considered it because it was so sad to hear that it was going to close. It did close. I think we took the photo in 2004. If I remember correctly, he did close in 2007. James and I went back and a cell phone store opened in the space. And then we went back again, like not even a year later, the cell phone store had closed and it was empty. And then a 99-cent store eventually took its place. And then they knocked into a neighboring storefront and they expanded the 99-cent store to like 2 storefronts. Because you can see this one's super, super tiny. It was like a tiny little hole in the wall shop. I think that if it was today, like 2023, and we had photographed the store and got inside and spoke with Mike, that I could have put it up on our social media because we have an Instagram channel, we have a YouTube channel, and I could have put out the call to our followers. Does anyone want to take over this store? Does anyone have a background in, you know, a butcher or not even, just want to take over the store, have the time and energy to learn how to make these sausages? I honestly believe, I think we could have made it happen. But it was so long ago, and at the time, honestly, we weren't sharing our photos with anyone. It was a very personal project. We were just keeping our photos. I mean, we had boxes and boxes, shoe boxes filled with photos. All our negatives, carefully, like I would carefully label them, stacks and stacks of negative in binders. We even had to rent a storage unit because we live in a small apartment in East Village just to put all this stuff because we had thousands and thousands of photos. I think if it had been today, we could have saved the store, but back then we weren't sharing our photos. It was the last thing on our mind. In fact, the whole reason why we even have a book, I mean, this is actually our 4th book on the subject, is because we were working on this other book project and our editor had come over our apartment and we had some of these mom and pop storefront photos up on our wall and he's like, oh, what are those? And I'm like, oh, you're not going to be interested in them because he's from California. And I was like, why would a guy from California be interested in a little mom and pop store photo of New York? You know, he's going to leave tomorrow. He's never going to go to the store. What does he care about it? But he's like looking at that and he's like, no, these are really interesting. Do you have more of them? And I'm like, more? You know, I started opening the closet and started taking out little shoe boxes. And then I'm like, oh, well, we got interviews too. And he's like, what do you mean you have interviews? And I'm like, oh, well, we interviewed the store owners. He's like, guys, this should be your next book project. And then he's the one that put the light bulb like into our head that, wow, we should compile all these and make a book. And that's exactly what we did. Our first book on the subject was in 2008. But this was, to us, one of the ones, sadly, that, you know, kind of slipped away. Now we're back into Manhattan. Sammy's restaurant, Romanian-style restaurant. And this is on Christie Street. And sadly, it is no longer in business. Now we're going to talk about that because
you hit the button.
Oops. That happened. Oops. Okay, now you see what's coming up. Sammy's Romanian-style restaurant. I got rid of it, guys. See, that's the modern technology. You must get rid of modern technology. Sammy's Romanian Steakhouse on Christie by Delancey has a history dating back over 80 years, and it was operating as a Jewish steakhouse since 1974. Now, if you look at the storefront photo, you can see right in the doorway, because it's kind of cut off here because we can only fit it on the screen. It's like a lengthy shot. is like a little staircase, because it was down in like the basement of this building. So that's that, where all those photos are actually steps right there, and then you go down, and then the door was to the left. It's all these little photos. And that kind of like gave you an inkling of what was going on inside. Because if you opened up the door inside, the walls were also lined with hundreds of photos of families, famous customers, including Anthony Bourdain. I know, may he rest in peace, was a fan there. Like countless celebrities would dine there. And they were famous for like their Jewish, it was a Jewish steakhouse, but they had like other appetizers like chopped liver and potato latkes and stuffed cabbage. And it was like a party atmosphere. I mean, if you've never been to it, we'll take questions at the end of this talk, but maybe some of you have memories of eating there. I think it's hard to describe, but going there was like, if you went by yourself or if you went just as a couple, you immediately became part of a family, because there would always be a celebration of either a birthday, a bat mitzvah, a wedding, something was happening. There was this guy named Danny Love, who was the musician who would normally work the nights there and be singing songs, and like everyone would be singing along. They had vodka that they would bring out a whole bottle of vodka encased in a giant, you know, like huge ice block. Like it was they would take this block of ice, I guess where they would pour water into a container, throw in the big bottle of vodka, and then put it in the freezer so the vodka would stay literally on ice. And they would just throw that in the center of the table, and you just start drinking the vodka, eating all the schmaltz. Don't forget the schmaltz on the table. And you guys don't know what schmaltz is. It's not for the people on a cholesterol-free diet. It's like rendered fat. You know, it's bright yellow. And you pour it all over your meal to make it even more tasty. But their specialty was their skirt steak. And if you went there, the small was 1 pound. The medium-sized skirt steak was 2 pounds. And the large was 3 pounds. Like it was an enormous slab of meat. And I mean, it's like, I want to cry of like how many times we went there and just had fun, James and I, joining in some family celebration that we didn't even know, and then we kind of became members of their family. We'd be included like in their wedding photos, and we wouldn't even at their wedding, you know, like we were part of it, and it didn't really matter, so it was all the same. The good news about Sammy's is that even though it closed due to the pandemic, they are supposed to reopen, so fingers crossed. They say that they found a space on Orchard Street, but opening a restaurant these days isn't like an overnight affair. There's a lot of hoops to go through with the city, with permitting and getting a liquor license and trying to figure out how late they can stay open, because this was a late night spot. So I mean, I think it has to do with neighbors upstairs, with noise ordinances and all this sort of stuff. So anyway, I mean, it's not a 100% done deal yet, but hopefully they will return. Hopefully they can bring back the same atmosphere that this one, because it was fabulous. All right, next we're back into the Village, because we had to talk about Village Cigars. This is located on 7th Avenue South at Christopher Street, and it's been in business since 1922. And we fell in love with the storefront. And it's a little unusual because, as you saw from the slides that we've shown already, most of the storefronts that we take, we have like a very linear approach to photographing the stores. We wanted it like straight on, dead straight, but with Village Cigars, the straight on would have been taking it from the side, like, because it's a wedge-shaped store, which is very unusual. And the reason why it's a wedge-shaped store is because this property where the Village Cigars was, created, used to be part of an estate, the Voorhees estate. The Hess estate. I don't know where I got Voorhees from.
That's the building.
Oh yeah, that's the name of the building. There was a building called the Voorhees that Mr. Hess owned. And what happened was the city came by and in the 1910s and they were building the subway. You see the subway station right there, the #1 Christopher Street station. They were building the subway, and they have this thing called eminent domain. If you're not familiar with it in New York City as a municipality has the right to take anyone's personal, property away if they're building a municipal project, like a subway, a school, or like a city-owned hospital, or something like that. And you can't say no. They will pay you for the value of your property, but you can't say no, I don't want to sell. They're just going to take it away. And it's a take it or leave it kind of thing. So Mr. Hess was very, very upset. He did not want to sell his Voorhees building. It was like, an apartment building. And in a strange twist of fate, he decided not to sell a tiny little property, which, it's cut off in this slide.
You can go to full screen if you want.
I can do what?
Just go to full screen, I think.
No, I got it. Hold on. Sorry, I'm just going to put this down for a second. I'm going to show you the page in the book. This is better yet. I know it won't be as big, but it's an important part of the story. We have an index in the back, so that way I don't have to waste time looking for a page number, which helps. Okay, here we go. Now you can see on the photo, on the bottom there is this tiny little triangle. I'm sorry that it got cut off on the screen there, but it is in the photo in the book. Now that tiny little triangle is actually a mosaic marker. That's 500 square inches. And it says, if you go to there today, make sure to look down and read the marker, because it says, property of the Hess estate which has never been dedicated for public purposes. And what that means is that Mr. Hess refused to sell that little 500 square inch piece of property. When they condemned his building and they tore down his building, he held onto that little tiny square of property and said, I'm not going to sell it to you. And he put that little marker in the ground to say, almost like a finger to the city, because I didn't really want to sell you this in the first place, I'm keeping this little bit. And when they created Village Cigars, when they created this storefront in this triangle shape, because they cut the street, New York is based on a grid system, Manhattan, like most of the streets, except for Greenwich Village doesn't fall into the grid system, are based on avenues going north and south, and the cross streets, like 14th Street, 34th Street, 42nd Street, going east-west. However, when they were cutting this to make the Christopher Street station, they ended up with a property having this weird triangle because of all the stuff that they had to do for the entrance to the subway. So look for that marker and think of Mr. Hess. But the lucky thing is that when Village Cigars opened in 1922, he sold that piece of property for $1,000 to the owners of Village Cigars. So now it goes with the storefront. So if the storefront's ever sold, that little piece of property goes with it. It still does not belong to the city this day, which I like that. Now, we're going to the Lower East Side. Now, to us, it was very important to include the Lower East Side, and we have a great deal of the book has Lower East Side storefronts because mom and pop stores began in the Lower East Side. There was no Greenwich Village, there was no Harlem, there was no Bronx, it was farmland. Queens was really farmland. Queens was probably really, besides Staten Island, one of the last places to be developed. Staten Island still to this day is very, lot of residential properties, not as many businesses. But we do have Staten Island included in our book. But Rustin Waters is just really personifies to us the American dream. Going back to what I was saying in the beginning, that these neighborhood stores were really a foothold for new immigrants that came to New York trying to make a better life for themselves and for their families. that's the story with Russ and Daughters. Russ and Daughters was founded from a push cart in 1907. Joel Russ, who was an immigrant from Poland, didn't have a lot of money, but he knew how to smoke fish because he had done so back in Poland. And he started selling smoked fish from a little push cart because he only had a few dollars. He could buy a push cart, and he pushed it around Orchard Street in the Lower East Side. When he saved enough money in 1914, he opened up his store. And that's really the genesis of how stores even began to be part of the fabric of New York City. Most commerce was done either from a push cart, or Fiorello LaGuardia also had created these markets. There were a number of them in the city. A lot of them are gone. One of the original ones that's still there today, but different because they moved it, is the Essex Street Market, which I encourage you to visit on the Lower East Side. There's also the Arthur Avenue Retail Market in Little Italy of the Bronx. It's kind of a throwback to the way the old markets were done. Fiorello LaGuardia tried to abolish push carts and created these markets. There used to be one in the East Village, and it's now actually the Theater for the New City building, a lovely nonprofit theater, by the way, is in that building. But they were basically places to get people off the street, stop peddling stuff on the street, and put yourself into a place of business. But they still couldn't afford an actual store, but they could they could afford a little stall in these markets. So that's really the genesis of stores. So Russ and Daughters began from a push cart by Joel Russ. And what happened is that he had 3 daughters who started working at the store as young children. And as teenagers, they were beautiful. And they were working in the store, and at the time, there was well over 100 appetizing stores in the Lower East Side. In fact, many just down the block or right nearby where Russ and Daughters was. And at the time, it was called Joel Russ Cut-Weight Appetizers. But what happened was, he noticed that when his daughters were beautiful teenagers, that he was getting more and more customers in the store. Because he used to go around and look, oh, what's this guy doing? What are his prices? Oh, it's not so busy in there. I guess I'm doing pretty well. And then he got to thinking, why am I doing so well? Oh, it's because of my daughters. They're coming into the store because they're flirting with my daughters, or they want to do matchmaking, like you get proposals all the time. I have a son, he's single. He's going to marry a daughter, or this daughter, or that daughter, because he had 3. So the light bulb went off in his head. So, you know what? My daughters are actually assets. At first, he was upset that he didn't have any sons to take over his family business, because most family businesses at that time, and still to this day, are passed from father to son, just like C.O. Bigelow Pharmacy across the way is passed from father to son, and now Ian Ginsberg, the present owner, his son is working alongside him as a pharmacist at the counter, again, from son to son. But being that he didn't have any sons, and now the light bulb went off in his head, wow, my daughters are actually a good thing for my business, he renamed the shop Russ and Daughters Appetizers. And it's believed to be the first shop in the United States, and maybe, who knows, the world, that has "and daughters" legally in its name, because not only did he create the signage, but he registered it down at the municipal building downtown as Russ and Daughters Appetizers, no longer just Joel Russ Appetizers. And that began the legacy of the store. And today, the 4th generation co-owner is Nikki Russ Fetterman, continuing the from father to daughter tradition. So I'm happy to say that she's part of the store, along with her cousin Joshua. But it's funny because Nikki, we interviewed her, she originally wasn't going to be part of the store. In fact, she became a lawyer, and she told us that her father was never so proud of her and her achievements than when she first sliced properly their smoked salmon. And when I say properly sliced. If you ever go into Russell Daughters, when they slice your salmon, you can hold it up and you can read a newspaper through it. It's so thin, it's perfection. And she's like, forget my law degree, forget all my achievements as a great lawyer. He was never so happy that when I held up that piece of smoked salmon and he looked at it and said, that's right, you did it. So she also told us that she thinks that her great-grandfather is also the person that coined the word appetizers. Because in the Jewish dietary laws, you're not allowed to mix meat with dairy and fish. They have to be sold separately. So when people started not just selling from push carts, but from having an actual storefront, they needed a name for the store. Instead of calling it Joel Russ, smoked fish, lox, caviar, bagels, schmears of cream cheese, or whatever else he could maybe fit on there, he needed a word to denote the kind of stuff that they sold, which was basically stuff that you would serve with bread and cream cheese, lox, smoked fish. And he coined that word appetizers. I mean, that's as the saying goes. But now it's appetizers for smoked fish, bagels, cream cheese, and then delicatessen was the word that was developed for selling something that has meat products. Just down the street is Cass's Delicatessen, which also is in our book, but we're not going to discuss that today. We try to vary, the different neighborhoods that are represented here in the book. And the interesting thing about Russ and Daughter appetizers is we asked Nikki Russ Fetterman, because the prevailing thing throughout our book, and the reason why so many stores have closed, is that they do not own the building that they're located in. However, Russ and Daughter's appetizers, they do own the tenement building that's above them. But Nikki Russ Fetterman told us that it might have not have been that way, because during the Great Depression, their family fell on really hard times, just like everybody suffered during the Depression. And their business wasn't doing well, because even back then, smoked fish was a more expensive item, as opposed to, say, Yuma Shimmel Kanishas. James is wearing the shirt right now. Yuma Shimmel is also in our book. That was a cheap filling potato, you could fill your belly for a couple of cents or whatever they charged. But smoked fish was always like, save your pennies to get it. So people just weren't buying smoked fish. I mean, basically she said there was hardly any customers at all, if any. And her great-grandfather had to make the decision to either sell the family home or sell the building and the business. And he decided to sell the family home and keep the business. And it was that decision during the Great Depression that is the reason why the store is still there today. Because he had the foresight to say, forget the home, they moved into a tiny, tiny little apartment nearby, crammed their large family into a tiny apartment. They didn't move into one of the apartments upstairs because they needed the income for, to survive, because they weren't getting any income from their store, so they needed a couple of however much they were, charging people to rent the apartment upstairs, and they had to move into a little apartment, and they sold their house. But she told us that decision was, had, ripple effects for many generations to come. She also told us that during the 1970s and 1980s that many customers would come in and encourage them to sell the store and move.
Just just tap the keyboard somewhere. It'll come back.
There you go. So what happened was, if you are familiar, this is on East Houston Street. If you're familiar with East Houston Street, in the 1970s and 80s, it had a lot of crime, drug problems in the area. James and I know ourselves. We've been residents in the East Village since the late 80s. We've lived in the same apartment now for over 25 years, and even our own building, there was our building not only was a drug building, so to speak, but there was a hot corner. Our corner where we lived was
was and still is, unfortunately to this day, a little bit of a hot corner, as they say. But the neighborhood wasn't that great, and people were actually frightened to come. Like, the customers would complain there. They were nervous to come, like, later on in the day, like, especially in the winter time when it gets dark by 4:30 in the afternoon. And they encouraged them, why don't you sell the building and move someplace else? You know, go to a safer neighborhood. And they said, no, we believe in this neighborhood. We believe that it will come back. We're going to stay here. We survived the Great Depression. We're going to stay here. And again, a very good decision, and still, while the business is still flourishing today. In fact, flourishing that you can go to visit their cafe. They opened a cafe down on Orchard Street. They also have their manufacturing where they make their own bagels and the alleys, and do other breads, and they, great vodka, by the way. They have an amazing vodka. In the Navy Yard, the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and they just recently opened, we haven't been to it yet because we've been so busy with our book coming out, but they just opened in the Hudson Yards and Outpost as well. So I encourage you to go there and check them out. Also, we love the neon sign. Do we have time, James, to talk about the neon sign? Perfect. Now, the neon sign arguably is our favorite neon sign in all of New York City because A, it's two-tone, green for the Russian waters, red for the appetizers, and has those cute little adorable fish on either side. And it's an original sign. It was put up around in 1951, and it was refurbished in 2008. And when I say refurbished, being that we live in the neighborhood, we remember they took it down. There's a great mom-and-pop neon store called Let There Be Neon. It's on White Street, right, James?
I believe so.
White Street in Tribeca, and it's owned by Jeff Friedman.
Right off West Broadway.
Right, it's not too far from West Broadway. A lovely gentleman, and we've highlighted it in our YouTube videos. Actually, we went inside the store and did a little video and showed the process of them bending the neon tubes. He's the one that was tasked with taking down the sign and refurbishing it because A, the neon wasn't working, B, the sign itself had almost rusted through completely that it was going to fall down. It was like held together by like two little screws, he said, was dangling onto the facade of the building. So they actually had to remove the whole sign, which is a big process to do. Normally you can just fix things like, you know, like while the sign is still up there, but this one needed a major overhaul. And Nikki Ross-Fetterman told us that it cost $10,000 to refurbish the sign. And at the time, I mean, now it would be even more costly because that was in 2008. At the time, she was told, not by Jeff, but by other sign makers, just get rid of your neon sign. Just be done with it. It doesn't light up anymore. Be done with it. Get a nice plastic sign. One that you won't have to worry about anymore, whether it lights up. We can make great helvetical lettering. You know, make it look really fantastic. And she's like, no, 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 no. We're keeping our neon sign. It's our hallmark. And it was such an amazing decision, and we're so happy she did it. But she told us that when the sign came down, because it was gone for like 2 whole weeks, that people were panicking. They were rushing into the store. They thought it was closing. They were like, oh my God, I gotta get my last bagel and lox fixed. And trying to stock up on stuff. And she had to assure them, no, 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 we're not closing. You just had to take down the sign. Other people came in yelling at her, why did you take down the sign? Are you going to put up an ugly plastic awning or something like that? You know, yelling and screaming at her. And she's like, no, 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 it's just being fixed. It's just being fixed. Don't worry, it's coming back. And it's back. So you can go there. Actually, we were just there on Saturday night, and only 2 letters of the neon was working. That's because it rained so much. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of the owners decide to get rid of the neon signs, is it's a lot of upkeep. I mean, one of the store owners told us that he has a contract with this neon sign guy, not Jeff, because he doesn't do like the day-to-day maintenance on the sign, on all these signs. There's another guy that does that. He pays him like a couple $1,000s a month because that's how much maintenance it needs to keep keep coming back every time one of the lights goes out. He has to call and have a service call. He has to fix it, put in a new transformer, or whatever it may be. It's a real labor of love, but I mean, we're happy that Russ and Daughters kept their sign and invested in the future because it's certainly a favorite of ours. Next up is Remington Typewriter. And this might not be a storefront that all of you are familiar with because it was founded in 1932, but it originally wasn't on 17th Street where it is today. It was originally in a building directly opposite the Flatiron Building, and it wasn't on the ground floor. It was on the second floor, and you either have to take a staircase with your heavy typewriter. By the way, James and I did that. Or there was an elevator to take you to this typewriter store. And it's a family-owned business. 3 generations have been replacing ribbons and refurbishing classic typewriters. I don't know if you can see it from here, but I'm wearing on my necklace 2 keys. This is from, it's a typewriter that I own, a 1924. And these are extra keys that I picked up because the keys came off and then made this little necklace, and then I have a little typewriter charm. James and I are analog all the way. We love film photography, and I have 9 typewriters. I would have more if I didn't live in a small studio apartment. I mean, James is always saying, you're not using that typewriter anymore, let's get rid of that one. I'm like, no, we have to keep it. I'll use it again. Every typewriter, if you use the typewriter, is different. You'd be like, well, why do you have 9 typewriters? They're all different. Like, every brand, every type is like, there's a different amount of pressure that you need to press on the key. It's hard to explain it if you've never actually used a typewriter, but it's a very tactile thing. I mean, I, to this day, just love, when I write, I like typing it up on a typewriter. I don't like typing on a keyboard on a computer. I don't know, call me old-fashioned. But Jay Schweitzer, who runs the business today, he's the 3rd generation owner with his father Paul, knows everything about typewriters. This is another instance where we included the owner in the photo. Because like I said, we normally do not have people in our photographs. We purposely did not include people in our photographs. However, Jay knows us because we've been bringing our typewriters to get new ribbon or, like a key breaks or something and I need a part. He knows, he has everything. He'd be like, oh, what do you need this time? Which typewriter? And I'll just say the one, and he knows exactly where to go, and I'll get the right spool, for it. I mean, it's just an encyclopedia of typewriters. When we're going to take the photo, he's like, oh, I'd love to have a typewriter, me holding a typewriter. I'm like, okay, go for it, Jay. And he must have spent like a half hour inside the shop trying to pick out which one he was going to use for the photo. And he settled on that one because I always ask him, what's your favorite typewriter? He likes the Olivetti, but he's a fan like me of the old American typewriters, like a Royal. I'm like three Royals. Remington Rand I also have. But he likes the Valentine too. But he chose that one. If you ever want to go in there and get a typewriter, if you could practice on them, try them out, and he'll help you. Like, oh, do you like a light touch? Do you like to really punch down on the keys? And he's just so fabulous, and he'll fix anything too. If sometimes it's just there's a little it's actually like a wire inside that helps move the carriage back and forth. It can snap, it can break over time. It's easy fixes for him, but he knows everything. In fact, many celebrities go there and get their typewriters, including Tom Hanks. You might not know this, but Tom Hanks has a big typewriter collection. Probably more typewriters than we have. And it even has a movie. A couple of years ago, came out with a movie about typewriters. But Tom Hanks is one of his clients, as well as a lot of writers, a lot of famous writers, and deceased writers were clients of the shop that would type up all their manuscripts on a typewriter. So I think we have, James, we have time for one more before,
Yeah, just quick, just do it quick, because that was our favorite.
Last but not least is one of our favorites, Katie's Candy Store, and this was in Bedford-Stuy, Brooklyn. It's sadly one of the stores that is no longer in business, and I'll tell you why we fell in love with it and why it remains a favorite of ours to this day. First of all, we fell in love with the signage. We're like, look at this sign. None of it makes sense. Like, the Katie's and the store are black, and there's this outline of the gold. You could see they did the gold, but they don't have that on the candy. So what happened? Why did they do that? And then the letters are all like, you know, the A in the candy is a different shape than the A in Katie's. The K has a little like fanciful little loop hanging off the end, where the other is more of a, sans serif. Like, basically, whoever painted the sign had no idea about the rules of typography or rules of sign painting in general. They just winged it. And seemingly, like, whatever fit, maybe they ran out of room, and that's why some things are like more squashed in than others. And we really like that about the sign. It just gave it character. And then if you look, cigar S, it's spelled wrong. See, there's 2 R's in cigarettes. So we like that, like, those little spelling mistakes as well. Plus, it's an old privilege sign. We have a number of what they call privilege signs, storefronts photos in our book. Usually what you think of them is when you see an old Coca-Cola sign. The Coca-Cola company, and as well as some Pepsi-Cola, sometimes 7-Up, and Optimo cigars, in the 1930s and 1940s, used to give a sign to a store owner who would agree, for free. They would give them the sign if they would agree to sell their product exclusively at their store. So if you were opening a deli, or a bodega, say, and you were willing to sell Coca-Cola, they would give you this sign for free, and then you put your own copy. Usually they would slide on letters, and it's kind of like a movie marquee where you would slide the letters on. In this case, Katie's was hand-painted, so it's actually a cola company called Good O, right?
Yeah, Good O in the Bronx.
Is from the Bronx. It was a family-owned, cola company. I don't think they're in business anymore, but that's where this sign came from. We found that out once we went inside and spoke with Katie. From the outside, that was what attracted to us. Plus the old phone booth. Phone booths you don't see anymore because basically they don't exist. They got taken away to make link kiosks, or there's very few phones anywhere anymore to make an actual phone call. And we also was wondering what that rope was. You see on the left side of the photo, there's a rope and it has a hook.
Yeah,
And
pull up groceries.
Exactly.
She knew it.
Yeah.
When we went inside the store, we were looking out. We looked back and we saw a bucket start going up, and we went out and we're like, oh my God! The lady who lives upstairs had come home and she was put all her groceries in the bucket, and her son was hoisting it up to the apartment so she didn't have to carry the groceries to the 3rd floor apartment. And we thought that was ingenious, absolutely ingenious. They made their own elevator for a non-elevator building. And when we went inside and we spoke with the owner, Katie Kaiser, I mean, she would like personify everything that you could think of like a tough Brooklyn woman. She had this gravelly voice of like smoked probably like 12 packs a day or something at one point. And it really was booming. Like my voice is loud, her voice was even louder. And I asked her, Katie, how long have you been in business for? And she told me, I founded this store in 1969. And I'm known as the dinosaur of Tompkins Avenue, because that's what it was, on Tompkins Avenue by Vernon in Bed-Stuy. She's like, I've been here so long, I've seen everything this neighborhood has thrown at me. The crack, the dope, the crime. This is her quote. I was here when it was all Jewish and Italian and when it changed to Spanish and Black. I've been through it all. I speak 3 languages, English, Spanish, and mother effer. She didn't say mother effer. I'm keeping it, you know, for the kids. Even though there's no kids here listening to this, you never know. We're recording this, so they might listen on the playback. I'm not going to be like Jerry Seinfeld and start, you know, with the little kid cursing. If you've ever watched that episode, we're big Seinfeld fans. If you're a Seinfeld fan, you know which one I'm talking about. At any rate, when she told us that, we laughed so hard. And she's like, you know what? She's like, one time, I was robbed. She said she's been robbed many times because the neighborhood was like changing at that time, but it had gone through a real rough patch in the 70s and 80s. And she's like, one time I was robbed not too long ago, and the kids came in, she calls them kids, and they had ski masks on. But I looked at their eyes, and I knew who they were. And I said to them, they tied me up, they tied me to my chair. She had a lazy boy chair, like behind the counter, and they duct taped her to the chair. And they were going to, you know, rob the cash register. And she's like, I know who you are, and you better untie me now, because I'm going to call your mother as soon as you know, leave the store. And you're going to get a beating like you've never had before. And then you'll get another beating from your dad when he gets home. So you better untie me now. And guess what? They untied her. But that's the kind of woman she was. When we went in there in 2004, she still sold penny candy. Everything she had in the store was only 1 cent. And she told us, I was like, Katie, how do you stay in business selling candy for a penny? I mean, even at that day and age, you couldn't buy penny candy anymore. She's like, no, I have to keep the prices low because I want to keep kids out of drugs in the neighborhood. She's like, there's still a lot of drugs going on in the neighborhood. I haven't changed my prices in years, and I'm not going to. In fact, my landlord wants to kick me out because he wants to create, like, you see all the empty storefronts. He bought up all the buildings in this neighborhood, and he wants to create like a big, beautiful new high-rise condo, knock us all down and make some nice development here because he sees that the neighborhood is changing. You know, because it was getting like, you know, more like younger people were moving in because neighboring areas of like Williamsburg were getting really expensive. So they were moving into Bed-Stuy because, you know, it was cheaper, but, you know, that's what the guy wanted to do. And she told us, I can't afford to pay $2,350 a month plus electricity and everything because I still sell my candy for a penny and I won't raise my prices. So unfortunately, Katie was forced to close because of this rent increase. She actually had time left on her lease, but she didn't realize that, you know, in this day and age, we could have probably put out a call to arms and like had it fought, you know, like had the landlord take it to court, but you know, this is back in 2004. People didn't realize, you know, a lot of people, you know, the power of like speaking out against greedy landlords. So unfortunately, it had to close. And to this day and age, James and I make the pilgrimage out there every few months. It's still empty. It's been empty for years and years and years. His condo project or whatever the guy who owns this building had envisioned never went through. And it's just a blight in the neighborhood. And that's what I mean, going back full circle, of why we started this project in the first place, why we began to document these mom and pop businesses, is because they're so important to a community. And really, the takeaway, I would say, from this whole talk is if you want to save a business, go to it. Buy something at the store, eat at the restaurant, buy a typewriter ribbon, if you have a typewriter, but go to the store. Crying about it after it closes doesn't do anybody any good. Even though some of the stores in our book have closed, that was not our reasoning to take the photo. We took the photo because we loved the store and we wanted to document it while they were thriving. And in our minds, we also wanted to help. It was kind of like an artistic intervention in our minds that if we could
somehow maybe eventually share the photos with people that we could give back to the community by telling people how important these lovely mom and pop stores are. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed our talk. I'm going to open up the floor now to any questions that anybody has. And at the end, we brought a couple of books. If you're interested in purchasing a book from us, we'll sign it for you. They're $40. That's the cover price. I'm not, you know, that's if you bought it anywhere, that's what it is. And yeah, so does anybody have any questions? Yes?
How did you get your storefronts without any people, like pedestrians walking by, especially Russ's Daughters, which always has a line?
That is an excellent question, and there's a couple of answers. Number one, patience. Lots of patience. I mean, sometimes we would stand for hours, but we have been known to go to the extreme. We pay careful attention of alternate side of the rule parking regulations, and back in the day when we were taking everything, you know, with film, and I didn't even have a cell phone, I would write down everything on a little notepad and be like, okay, Tuesday and Friday from 8 to 9:30 p.m., no cars. Check to see if the business was open. Yes, check, good, opens at 9. Let's get here at 8:45 and stand there and wait and make nobody's gonna get that parking spot. James has a friend that works for Con Ed. When we told them our problem, that like, oh my God, a box truck came, we were ready to take the photo, and then a big UPS truck came and then parked right in front, and then, ugh, there goes the photo. There was no taking it. He's like, oh, you should do what I do. And we're like, what do you mean, what do you do? He's like, well, you know, when we gotta work on a manhole or something like that, you know, I put on the cones, and I got my hard hat, and we cone it all off. And he's like, so why don't you cone it all off? And we're like, oh my God, you're brilliant. He's like, here's 2 cones. They were heavy, by the way. Here's a vest. I'll give you guys a vest. I'll even give you guys some hard hats. Here, why not? I got lots of them in the truck. Take them. We even went to that extreme on Bleecker Street to do that, because Bleecker Street is always busy. Even though there was no parking right in front, they would always be getting deliveries with big box trucks, and we actually went to that crazy extreme. So that was a really, really good question. Anybody else have any questions? Now, I want to tell you, oh yes, go ahead.
Will you kindly repeat about the typewriter school?
Oh, Gramercy Typewriter, of course. Let's go back. Yes, Gramercy Typewriter is on 17th Street. It's right off 6th Avenue. And when it originally opened in the 1920s, it wasn't there. This is a new store that we included in our book. This is one of the previously unpublished photos that we had never published before, because it just opened just a few years ago. Jay, the 3rd generation owner, decided to open an actual storefront where people could actually walk by and see the typewriters in the window and buy some of the beautifully reconditioned typewriters that he sells.
Used to be above Eisenberg. It used to be above Eisenberg's.
Right, it used to be above
On Fifth Avenue.
The sandwich shop.
Yeah.
Right across from Flatiron Building.
Right.
But it was on the 2nd floor, so unless you knew about
They had a little
it,
showroom, but
right, it wasn't really a place where you would buy typewriters. It was really just a place you get your typewriter fixed or buy typewriter supplies. We had heard about it from word of mouth, because one of our friends is a journalist and who had a typewriter, and I needed more ribbon. And at the time, I would be going to Essex card shop and taking ribbon that they used to use for like the old-timey like adding machines, and I would like rig it up onto the spool and use that as my typewriter ribbon, because I didn't know where to buy typewriter ribbon. And he's like, oh, you don't have to do that and get your hands all messy. You know, you can buy the real ribbon that's made for your typewriter. And I'm like, what do you mean made for my typewriter? And he's like, oh yeah, this guy's got hordes of it. And he does. He's got hordes of these old
and he
ribbons.
cleans them all.
And he cleans them all, like they get dirty.
You know, like if a letter is,
Yeah, it's on West 17th Street, right off 6th Avenue. Jay Schweitzer is the owner.
he brings them home. His dad still.
Yeah, his father, although rarely comes into the store anymore, his father's elderly, he
does still work from home, and Jade will bring the old machines back home for his father to work on the machines and fix them. Jade knows how to fix them too, but, the father still likes to, work on everything. So even though he's not physically at the store, he's still working.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions? How about, oh, yeah.
So I was curious, what are your thoughts on commercial rent regulation? Do you think that would help small businesses, or do you think there are other measures that would be more effective?
Well, I mean, that's a loaded question, because it would help the small businesses that actually don't own their storefront. But that's not the only solution. I mean, I think in the long run, our thinking is that what helps businesses is customers, number one. The rent increases are very disturbing. I mean, to the point where, I remember Colony Music, when the beautiful music store in Times Square, if you guys remember it.
The big neon.
The big neon, if you were fans of Broadway.
The door
they had
handles.
little show tunes, everything, but they had literally had everything.
The
there.
door handles.
They increased their rent 15 times. I will never forget that when the owner told me that they would be closing. 15 times. I said, 15 times. I'm like, doubling it or tripling it would be a lot, because it was a big store, trust me. I mean, if you don't know the store, it was huge, and it was more than one level, so they were paying a lot of money. But
It was in the Brill building.
right, but the Brill building, yeah. But to raise something 15 times is basically like, not using my middle finger, but that's what the landlord was doing to them. Like,
Right.
he was just saying, get out. Because no one really can afford a 15 times rent increase, no matter how good your business is doing. So, I think commercial rent regulation would help, but, it's a tough call because, I don't own a building in New York, but I can understand from the standpoint of a landlord that they have to pay higher taxes. The taxes are going up every year.
Yeah, because the owners that own buildings tell us.
Right, the owners that own buildings tell us how much, one guy told us in the Bronx, this was a music store that was forced to close. We actually did a crowdfunding to help save his sign. It was Palumbo Music Store, his neon sign, and we did get it saved. It's going to be displayed in the Neon Sign Museum now. But the owner told us that when he first took over the business from his father, that his taxes, his taxes for owning the building were like, maybe $1,800. This was back.
It was big. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is like, a nice sized piece of property in the Bronx, on Gun Hill Road. I would say that was probably around in the early 2000s, where it was about $1,800. It's not a lot of money. Sounds affordable. He told me that none of that anymore. This was like in 2010 when we first interviewed him. Try $18,000, and then it went up every year after that. Property taxes are super duper high. So, having spoken to the store owners, and I can see it from both sides of the story, that maybe, it sounds good to do commercial rent regulation, but within a scale, like maybe to say you can't make it 15 times. Like, you can not say like it has to remain low forever, but it has to rise with the rising costs of whatever your real estate taxes are. Because a lot of the businesses that rent the properties of these storefronts, they pay a large percentage. We didn't know this until we started interviewing the owners, but they pay a large percentage of the property taxes for the entire building, whether or not there's resident above them. But especially if it's rent control apartments above them, because the rent control income isn't paying for the huge rent increases in the building. It's the commercial on the bottom, on the ground floor that is. So saying, like making a sweeping statement saying, let's do commercial rent increases, to me, is not the solution, because unless you can do it on a scale that will help the property owner as well. Comes to some sort of agreement that, okay, the taxes went up X, whatever, 10%. So then I can raise the storefront property, rent X% to go in line with it. But only then, because then you'd be penalizing everybody that owns a building. And, you don't want to do that either. New York should be about the opportunity for everyone. For us, it's never about being sad when a mom and pop store closes. Because, it is sad. But we don't mind if a store closes if another mom and pop store takes its place. Because then it's giving the opportunity for maybe a new immigrant or somebody, that moves to New York for the first time and has a dream to open up their own store. A bakery or a typewriter store or whatever, whatever you want. A bodega, it could be anything. Whatever your dream is, a used record store. So as long as it's not like a chain store, we're not fond of those, or another bank, or some entity that you don't even know what it is. There's these stores there's no sign. I don't even know what the heck's going on back behind those doors. What are they? There's no sign. The windows are all blacked out. It's like a mystery. What's in there? Maybe it's something good, but James and I are not going to take a photo of it because I don't know what the heck it is. So, I hope that answers your question. Anybody else have any questions? Yes?
I took neon sculpture in 1978, I think, from Rudy Stern, who used to own Let There Be
Yes,
Neon.
yes.
That is so hard to do, you have no idea.
We've watched it. It's an art.
I couldn't do it. You have to use a ribbon burner. I used a ribbon burner, which was long, so you could just do freeform. But when you have to do letters and that crossfire thing, impossible. It's worth every cent they pay for it.
It's an art,
It's
yeah.
it's a true art form. That's why we I'll go back to it.
I love
so
neon.
much, and so happy that they kept their neon sign. Now James is been recording this, and we're actually he's live streaming it. Do you have a question from the audience that you? Does anybody have any questions that you noticed on the live stream?
No, just a lot of love for Russian daughters.
Oh, excellent.
They're saying you're making them hungry.
Of course.
Yeah.
There are a lot of food businesses in here. So if you're going to look through the book, maybe on a full stomach. Or no, better yet, look through it on an empty stomach and then go to your local mom and pop store and get something that you're craving. To us, the reason James and I moved to the East Village many years ago is because of the preponderance of mom and pop stores. And I think one of the reasons why there's so many is because there's so many small tenement buildings that have such a small footprint on their ground floor, like that it doesn't attract the chain stores. That being said, unfortunately, developers have come by, just like in the case of Katie's, that she told us that the grand plan of why they kicked her out was to knock down her whole building because the guy bought up all the buildings around it, which were all empty storefronts, and he was going to create, some big glass. And
Someone's asking, do we have any Staten Island?
Yes, Staten Island.
So we do have Staten Island.
All 5 boroughs are represented in the book, so we did not leave out anybody. And in fact, Staten Island was a big challenge for James and I because we didn't have a car. If you've ever gone to Staten Island, it's very hilly. There was a lot of walking and a lot of residential neighborhoods. And not very good public transportation. There is a train, but it only gets you so far, and then it's buses.
Yeah, we tried to walk it.
But James and
It looks small on the map.
Right. How we took our photos, this is just an aside that I'll just go off on a tangent here, is we would always walk. And that's what we still do to this day. James and I have a dog. At the time when we were doing our first book, we actually had 2 dogs. And walking with them, we would just discover all these different neighborhoods. And we would just walk and look and find these lovely stores to photograph. So yeah, it was never about, sometimes we'd have to take public transportation to get to an outlying neighborhood, but then once we were there, it was always walking around. So that's how I always encourage people to discover different neighborhoods is if you can, I mean, I know sometimes walking is difficult for some people who have disabilities, but if you can, walk because it's really the best way to discover your neighborhood and make a friend. Go inside to the store owner, get to know their name, like James and I go to our wonderful bodega, they know us, and they'll, if we get a coffee from there, they know how we like it. It's there waiting for us. Black for James, me with milk and sugar. Yes?
Do you ever go back to stores that you photographed and then they've closed and then you photograph the new facade? Do you ever?
I mean, we have a project that we put up on the internet. We did it like a then and now kind of thing where we
10 years
later. It was a 10 years later project because we a lot of the photos initially were in the early 2000s. Like we did it like say the photo was 2004, then in 2014 we revisited it and then we posted it on the internet. And I mean, sadly, I mean it got more attention than the open storefronts. It's sad in a way, like when people see that the store is gone and they see the empty shell that theirs now, or the bank, like 2nd Avenue Deli, and we photographed the original 2nd Avenue Deli in the East Village, and you go there now, it's a Chase Bank, it's like, ugh. In here, Mars Bar, the iconic dive bar in the East Village, it's a TD bank now. They knocked down the whole building and they put up the monstrosity, the glass and steel, and it's a TD bank on its ground floor. When we put those up and we did it like a side-by-side comparison, I mean, the media, you know, went crazy for it. People were messing with us. And to us, again, it's not really the message that we really wanted to convey with the project. Really the message is a celebration of the stores that are still in business and not a lament of the ones that are gone, because crying over the ones that are gone is not going to make them come back. It doesn't do anybody any good. Instead, put the energy, you know, we did that project just because we wanted to see, but you know, people say, oh, you should make a book out of it. It's just too painful, and it was almost like it got such a big reaction, a reaction that we didn't almost really like, that we wanted to make it more, keep it positive, like we're very positive people, and we always think that one little message of going to your mom and pop store and buying something from there or frequenting them, you can help save them. And it honestly has worked, because during the pandemic, James and I personally put all our time and effort into saving and a couple of the storefronts in our own neighborhood, putting it up on our Instagram. It's at JamesandKarla if you're interested, Karla with a K. And I mean, honestly, the store owner, you know, in a couple of cases told us that it was us putting us on Instagram to go to that store and help it, that helped save the business, especially during the pandemic when they really needed it. It brought, I mean, I'm almost tearing up now thinking about it. It brought tears to our eyes because we never really realized like that it could make such a, doing this one little post just from the bottom of our heart can make, you know, such a big difference in somebody's life. But it's true, it really, really can. So, I mean, even though the project began as like us not sharing it with anyone, that's not what our project is today. We're still photographing mom and pop stores. We're excited when a new store opens. A new pizza place opened in our neighborhood. We were one of the first ones to go there. We watched as the signage went up. It's called Funzy's Pizza on St. Mark's Place. And it's a great pizzeria, I'll mention. Of course, it's not in a book because it just recently opened, but what a fabulous store, and it was so great to see because they made it like look old, like an old-timey pizza.
It's
and
good.
We really appreciated that. The owner who we met, Kevin, so nice that he took the time to make a welcoming place and something that looks so visually interesting, because we just were so excited to finally see it open, and now we're customers today. Any other questions? Yes?
No questions. Time has changed. I don't know, do you remember this place called the Nancy Street?
Yes, of course.
Remember when they used to have all of the stores there that were really inexpensive?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it was like, Delancey Street had a lot of sewing supply stores, and some of which we photographed back in the day, but it had a lot of discount stores. We actually did a lot of photography there. We have like the old sneaker store. It's all old film. It never made it into our book. I mean, literally, we have thousands of
Notions.
photographs. There was an old Ratner's Delicatessen there.
Lichtenstein's,
Lichtenstein's was another.
the trimming
Trimmings and woolens.
for
yeah.
sewing.
I mean, the Delancey Street is very different now. I mean, the Essex Market Project, you know, they're trying to revitalize it. It's a different thing. I mean, the Essex Market Project, I can honestly say our photographs, we printed them near life size. We have a photo installation in their bottom floor. They have 3 of our large scale photographs that they commissioned us to provide as part of the artwork for there. I applaud them for trying to help have a place that people can go to as like a gathering place. Because to us, a lot of these stores, they act as like ad hoc community centers and like a gathering place for people. You want to know about the neighborhood? Spend some time in your barbershop, get your hair cut, you'll find out all the gossip. You know, similarly, a food store. So the Essex Market, even though it's a new development and it's in a new building, and they raised a lot of those low one-story storefronts, which, you know, we weren't too happy about initially. I mean, I think their developers, I mean, it's a yin-yang of like, you know, trying to find a balance of new development and what is going to be the future. And for James and I, we always think about like maybe what we think of as like not a great storefront. Now, you know, 100 years from now, another photographer might come along and say, "Oh, this is fabulous. This is wonderful." So, you know, it's all about tastes and you know, aesthetics, but we applaud when at least they're trying to build a community together. So, yeah, I mean, hopefully that answers your question. But yeah, Delancey Street, it's not a discount place anymore. Now it's expensive restaurants. I mean, in the Essex Market, there are some affordable things, but there's expensive.
Shopsons.
Yeah, Shopsons. Go to Shopsons. Exactly. That is a fabulous one. So yeah, thanks guys for coming. Really appreciate it. Also, if you're interested in seeing any of our photos, we do have a gallery show up at 12 St. Mark's Place. It's Village Works Gallery. It's also a used bookstore. We're actually going to have a signing event there this Saturday, but we also have an exhibition. So if you wanted to see how some of our photos look, you know, printed larger than they are in the book, you're more than welcome to go there. It's open from we call it East Village time, about, you know, 1 p.m. in the afternoon-ish to like 1 a.m. So the later the better for that store. Like I said, East Village time. But thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Gary.
The other ones, they actually started as
I will, yeah.
hardcover, but then we had to release it.
Guys, thanks for watching. We'll touch base with you after.
There isn't.
Thanks
No,
again.
the other